Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Happy Cinco de Mayo. My name is Dino Confalone, and I'm the president-elect for 2020, incoming president for 2021 of the Greater Boston Realty Board. Also a realtor with Gibson Sotheby's International Realty in Cambridge. Today, we are going to be talking about COVID-19, and we have some phenomenal panelists that are going to help us with some information. First of all, I'll have to talk about some webinar ground rules. To submit your questions using the feature box, I will get a list of those questions. I'll be able to ask the panelists as we go. So I'll be managing basically all the questions. This session is being recorded and the link will be sent out via email by tomorrow. You can find previous GBAR live webinar recordings on gbar.org under education and events. Now I'd like to provide some recognition for our webinar sponsor, Metro Credit Union, and I'd like to introduce Deb Frank, the Vice President and Mortgage Business Development. She is a current member and past chair of GBAR Industry Affiliates, is also a past recipient of GBAR Affiliate Member of the Year Award, and Metro Credit Union is a Diamond sponsor for 2020. Thank you, Deb.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Deb Frank, Vice President of Mortgage Business Development at Metro Credit Union, longtime GBAR Affiliate Committee member and the proud Diamond sponsor for 2020. As a financial institution, Metro Credit Union is considered an essential service, and as such, we have been open for business, albeit in a more limited and different capacity. With the safety of our members and employees in mind, Metro has taken steps to assist with containing and slowing the spread of the virus, including deploying a large portion of our staff to be able to operate in a remote work environment. Our employees have risen to the challenge, and we are very proud of them. Metro branch drive-ups continue to be open regular hours, with other banking needs being managed by appointment. To support our members during these unprecedented times, Metro has responded by offering a hardship loan to assist in those facing financial hardship, such as a reduction in work hours, illness, or unemployment due to COVID-19. I'm sure that many of you have been reading about all the mortgage guideline changes, including larger down payment requirements on jumbo loan products. As a community lender, Metro continues to offer a full array of loan products to our members, including jumbo portfolio purchase loans with low down payment options and competitive rates for qualified borrowers. We have the size and scope of a large financial institution with the flexibility and freedom to act in ways they can, and that's a good thing. As each day passes, Metro Credit Union continues to ensure that we're able to serve members as best we can. We continue to work together even while working apart, always keeping the health and safety of members, partners, and employees a top priority. At Metro, we are competitive, we have a heart, and no matter what success looks like to our members, we'll be here to help them achieve it. Thank you for attending this session on exploring remote notarization law and conveyancing issues with your speakers, Noel DiCarlo and Jack O'Donoghue. I look forward to the day when we can work together again face-to-face. Thank you.
Thank you, Deb. That was great. Appreciate it, and appreciate your sponsorship with GBAR. So our next part of the program is going to be the panelists. Welcome. The impact of the pandemic on conveyancing matters. We have, I'm proud to introduce Noel DiCarlo, the partner with Warshaw DiCarlo and Associates, and she's going to be having some slides as well. Welcome, Noel.
Thank you. So I'm going to share my slides, and just bear with me. Okay, sharing. Okay, does everyone see my slides?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so, okay, just bear with me here. All right, so today I'm going to discuss virtual notarization in the COVID crisis, and specifically the new notary law enacted by Governor Baker last Monday, a week ago Monday, on April 27th. That law is Chapter 71 of the Acts of 2020, and it's entitled An Act Providing for Virtual Notarization to Address Challenges Related to COVID-19. And what a very aptly yet long named title. Challenges related to COVID-19. We've all been facing challenges in our personal life and with our own firm or within our own businesses. lots of changes to our work environment. As realtors, you all are facing that every day. It went from normal procedure per normal to all of a sudden not really being able to conduct open houses. Showings have been affected. You have open houses have been canceled. How do you deal with final walkthroughs or smoke detector certificates? So I don't have to discuss with you how your business has been affected because you're living through it every day and how we need to sort of pivot to continue in our business. As an attorney, however, the change for practitioners is really the requirement to conduct closings in person. For practitioners, notarization is an integral part of our jobs. We notarize not only mortgages and closing documents, but also other really important legal documents, such as a will, a guardianship document, powers of attorney, transfers, deeds, just to name a few. And so the question is, how do we do our job, but continue to keep both ourselves and our staff and our clients and realtors safe while conducting our job? And that was really the impetus for the new emergency law. The current notarial statute, which is Mass General Laws 222, and actually I'm going to just switch my slides here, so bear with me. 222 requires that a notary and a signer are together in a singular place and time, okay? So that requires that when I'm putting, or when me or Jack are fixing our stamp to a mortgage, that we need to be present with the signer and asking them if they're signing voluntarily as their free act and deed, or any notary acting as a notary has to make sure that them and the signer are in a singular place and time when conducting the notarial act. And so one of the questions I've been frequently receiving over the past 5 weeks as I'm a board member of the Real Estate Bar Association, and I'm the co-chair of the Residential Conveyancing Committee, so I've been working on this legislation along with others, a coalition of others, for the past 5 weeks, is why did it take so long? Other states were able to get these laws passed sooner, and why did it take 5 weeks for Massachusetts? And so I just wanted to address that because it's a question I've been frequently getting from other practitioners as well as real estate realtors. And executive orders, which is what was passed in many other states, which means that a governor just gives an order that we're now switching the way we conduct notarizations to allow for virtual notarization. That was considered early on in the process, but we have some history here in Massachusetts where Romney's executive orders related to notarizations were then later overturned by the bankruptcy court in 2 cases. And so the word came out very quickly that an executive order, which would have been a faster approach, in which many other states took, really wasn't going to be the solution here in Massachusetts. And so early on, we knew we had to go in a legislative route. And legislation takes a long time, right? You need to get the Senate and the House to agree, and we are not in a normal session, so any one senator or any one member of the House could stop a bill from passing. And then you need to get in addition to the Senate and the House to approve a bill, you need to get the governor to sign off on it, since we don't have a quorum. And so this process in normal life takes 2 to 3 years. And so for here, it took 5 weeks. It seemed like a long time, but really it was lightning speed. Meanwhile, both branches had other more pressing, quite frankly, laws that they were looking at, municipal laws related to foreclosures and evictions. And so all of those were happening, and we were also working together. Now, the Real Estate Bar Association joined sort of a coalition of stakeholders who also had interest in the notary law. This law doesn't just apply to attorneys, it also applies to any notary. So if you think of all of the documents that require notarization in your daily life, this law covered those notarial acts as well. So if you can imagine deeds to cars, you can imagine documents for financial institutions, life insurance, and all of those documents were actually being signed frequently and up against the same roadblock of people not wanting to meet the notary in person. So we had to sort of corral and work with all of the stakeholders who came out of the woodworks and said, we want our input on this legislation. And I really want to thank our REBA lobbyists, John Fernandez and Ed Smith, who helped guide and navigate us down the legislative maze, let's put it that way, because it was quite a maze. It was lots of man hours or women hours in trying to get us to where we are, but we got to the finish line. And so because a lot of realtors also act as notaries, I want to go through and just give you a brief overview of the law. One, so that if you decide to notarize pursuant to Chapter 71, you have an understanding of what you need to do. But also, I want to also give you an overview of what that would look like for a closing so that you can manage your client's expectations as to the process, okay? So let me just switch slides here. And sorry, I'm having to toggle between screens, so bear with me. So the important part about the law is that it preserves the practice of law. So in Massachusetts, we have this, that someone who's not an attorney can't authorize or engage in the practice of law. And Chapter 71 still preserves that. So I know that we're dealing with a savvy group of people here, and I don't have to say this, but no one should be conducting a closing that doesn't have the substantial involvement of an attorney. In the past, a notary could, 6 weeks ago, notarize a will. Under the new law, if a notary is going to be notarizing a will virtually, that notary has to be an attorney. So Chapter 71 really preserves certain notarial acts to attorneys. And so those notarial acts are any document executed in the course of a closing transaction involving a mortgage or other conveyance of title to real estate, or any sort of probate document as defined in the statute. So a will, a nomination of a guardian, a durable power of attorney, a trust. Any of those documents, you need to be an attorney or a paralegal under the direct supervision of an attorney to notarize. So you don't want, if someone asks you, can you notarize my power of attorney? Really, under this new act, you can't unless you're an attorney, okay? And the reason why that was put in there was because the in-person requirement under Chapter 222 is really intended for to protect the legal integrity of documents. So when you're in person with someone, you can potentially see if you sense a competency issue, or if there's undue influence that you're seeing, and other considerations. When you take that away, how do we put bumper guards in to make sure that the legal integrity of that document is protected and not questioned down the road? And so that's why the legislation says when it comes to these specific documents, we want to make sure we have an attorney or paralegal directly under the supervision of an attorney being the ones notarizing those documents, okay? So let's look at some preliminary matters. If you are notarizing, you would use some type of video conference service, such as we're using now. And the first thing you want to do is obtain the consent of the person that is on the signer of the document that you are going to be recording an audio and video recording of the session. That's a Massachusetts law. You can't record someone without their consent. So that's the first thing you want to do when you jump on the video conference. You want to make sure that whatever video conference program you're using allows you to maintain an audio and video recording on your computer in some file that you can save, okay? You need to, as a notary, be physically located in Massachusetts. Nothing has changed. Before, if you weren't physically located in Massachusetts, you couldn't notarize a document. Nothing has changed. You want to make sure that the signer, the person on the other side of the video, also attests to you under the penalties of perjury that they are also physically located in the state of Massachusetts. Nothing has changed. Before, you shouldn't have been notarizing someone's document in Florida. Same thing. So you want on that video recording that you're in Massachusetts and the signer is also in Massachusetts. You also want to ask if they're alone in the room. And if they're not alone, you want them to visually show you anyone who's in the room and have them state the relationship to them. So my suggestion is, if you're going to be notarizing, have a conversation ahead of time and say, unless you really need to be in the room with someone else, only the signer should be in the room. And the reason why that's there, again, is the question of undue influence, with someone, pressuring you to sign a document, okay? And then the signer will then provide a notary public with satisfactory identification of evidence of identification. So if you know the person, well, that's sufficient. If you don't know the person, they should hold up a driver's license and show you the back and front. You also have to obtain a copy of that. So they can either email it to you, scan it, send you a copy, but you want to show on the video that they showed that driver's license. I won't get into all of the various evidence of identification, but it's clearly laid out in the statute what is evidence of identification, okay? You have to, as a notary, retain a copy of that ID for 10 years. So if the person doesn't have any way of getting you a copy of the ID, a screenshot of your also works, but you need to retain that ID. Now, in the course of a real estate transaction, the attorney on the other side also has to obtain a secondary form of ID, and the statutes give some examples of what that secondary form of ID is, so your attorney conducting the closing will know that, all right? And then let me just move to my next slide here. Okay, so the procedure is this. So you did all of the preliminaries. You confirmed that you're in Massachusetts. You got a copy of the ID. You figured out who was in the room, and you got their consent to record. Now you actually start the procedure to notarize. The notary public will then observe the person signing the document. And then the signer will say, if it's a normal notarization, that they signed it freely and voluntarily as their free act and deed, if it's a jurat, under the penalties of perjury, okay? And once the person signs, they have to return that wet ink signed document to the notary. You can coordinate how you want them to do it. They can drop it off at a Dropbox, overnight mail, messenger, however you want to do it. But that original document has to be returned to you. Once you receive that original document, you then affix your stamp and sign it. That completes the notarial act. Now, if this was in the context of a real estate closing, upon the receipt of the closing documents, the attorney has to get on a second video conference to confirm that the documents they received were in fact the documents they saw the signer sign. And it's really a chain of custody issue there, and that's why you have this second requirement. That second requirement is only for closings or any documents with the transfer of title. It does not relate to a realtor or doing, getting a 6D notarized or a probate document. The audio and video recording of one or both conferences also has to be retained by the notary for 10 years. Okay, and just bear with me. Okay.
Well,
as I mentioned,
excuse me. Noel, I just want to tell all the attendees that they can submit questions via the question box located in the toolbar to the left or bottom of their screen, or they can submit one via the chat box, and then I will be asking everyone questions from that.
Thank you, Dino.
Thank you, Noel.
So the procedure, as I mentioned, there's an additional procedure if it's a real estate closing to jump on a second video conference, which we just went through. Okay, so once you've had that video conference and you've received the documents and you stamped it, the notarial act is complete. And now you as a notary need to fill out an affidavit stating essentially that you've complied with Chapter 71. So that affidavit needs to state that you received a copy of the ID, that you obtained their verbal consent to record, that you took their attestation, that they were in Massachusetts, and you were informed of everyone present in the room and that person was visible to you and what that relationship was to the signer. So basically a checklist for you to say, I, under the penalties of perjury, state that as a notary, I complied with Chapter 71. That affidavit also has to be retained by the notary public, whether or not you're an attorney, for 10 years, okay? Okay, let's talk about the notary clause. The notary clause is going to be the same notary clause as before with one small addition. So the county that you should be filling out is the county that you're located in at the time that you did the video conference. So it doesn't matter if you're in Middlesex County and the signer was in Norfolk County, the notarial clause should say Middlesex County is where you the notary, are located in. And the date that the notarial clause is signed is the date that you're going to include in the actual notary clause or certificate. So that might be a day or two after the signing actually happened, and that's okay. There is a provision for a closing that the closing attorney could have the date match the mortgage date. So there's some issues with some lenders having, not liking having a signature date being one date and the notary date being another. So the statute provides for that and includes that if only in the context of closing, the real estate attorney can date the notarial clause the same date as the mortgage document. And we want to also put in there that and then you also have to add a sentence at the end stating that this notarial act was done pursuant to Chapter 71, so that people know that this was done in this special way. Now, there's some bumper guards in here. We don't want a third party to be harmed by a notary not appropriately telling the world that they notarized under Chapter 71. So the failure to include any of the required recitals shall not affect the validity and recordability of a document against a bona fide third party. So for example, a purchaser, if the sellers got a deed notarized in this way and the notarization didn't happen correctly or wasn't designated correctly, a third party purchaser's ownership of a home is not going to be in question. Now, it doesn't mean sorry, my screen sharing has paused. Can you see my screen now? Okay. Well, we'll just keep going. It doesn't mean that that the notary may not get in trouble or otherwise have punishments for not following the law. It just means that a third party won't be subject to. Can you see my screen now?
You're back. Slides are
Great.
back.
Okay.
It
just
okay.
okay.
Okay, now they're back.
Okay, great. It just means that a third party is not won't be harmed by it. All right. The last, I just want to do a quick overview of the materials that are required to be retained, because I sort of said it throughout. So the notary has to retain a copy of the affidavit. They have to retain a copy of the driver's license or other form of ID. They have to retain a copy of the audio and video recording, and they have to retain that for 10 years, okay? So you want to make sure that if you're doing this, you have the ability and capability and security to meet these guidelines. The duration, this is going to be in effect for this, temporary Chapter 71 virtual notary statute. It's going to be in effect for 3 business days following the termination of the state of emergency. Now, don't confuse the state of emergency with the stay-at-home order. The stay-at-home order, as extended, ends on May 18th. The state of emergency will likely continue for a significantly longer period of time. So that is an important distinction, okay? And we're coming to the end here. I just want to say one other thing, and that is, given what is required of a notary under Chapter 71, I think really the best thing is to really only consider notarizing essential documents. If you can, get your client's attorney involved to do this. We're all working together on this, but as a notary, you're required to retain affidavits and documents, and not everyone may be capable or able to do it or have the appropriate security to do so. So, and the other thing I want to say is that one of the other reasons why this statute took a little bit longer to pass was that both branches of government didn't want to pass a bill that was later found to not comply with Fannie Mae guidelines. Fannie and Freddie Mac buy most of the loans in the secondary market, and if something passed that didn't comply with Fannie or Freddie, then that would be a real issue or problem. Fannie came out in late April with guidelines about RIN, Remote Ink Signed Notarization. So now we have an acronym for what we have. With much effort from the Real Estate Bar Association and CADIC and others, we got Fannie Mae to opine as to whether they would purchase mortgages signed in this way, and they said yes. So not every lender is quite frankly on board yet. This is new legislation, and we've been working with mass mortgage bankers and mass bankers to try to answer their questions and concerns so that more lenders are okay with the RIN process. But you should let your clients know that they may not be able to sign remotely, that they should speak with their attorney and their lender and work through that. as a common theme, and what you've heard me say is speak to your attorney. The team in any real estate closing transaction is always the client, the realtor, and the attorney. That's your real estate team, right? It's your quarterback, your tight end, your receiver. So this is who you should be involving. And typically attorneys get involved after the signing of an offer. I mean, as an attorney, I'm sure, Jack, you feel the same way. We would love to get involved sooner, but that just doesn't happen. And in a situation like this, I would say bring your team together even before the offer. We're in unusual times, and the buyer or seller's attorney may want to include riders to protect them. The riders there's several riders being circulated by, certainly the Real Estate Bar Association, different real estate companies are circulating their own rider, but every rider doesn't apply to every transaction. Every transaction is different. Maybe you want to do a holdback with your smoke certs, or maybe you don't. Maybe you want to allow for extension, maybe you don't. So bring your team together sooner and get the attorney involved sooner so they can help you draft what goes into the offer, and also help you manage your client's expectations. We're all in this together. It doesn't have to be on you. And as conveyancing and closings attorneys, Jack and I can assure you we're happy to get involved sooner. All right, Jack, you're up.
All right, thank you. Jack, I'll do a quick introduction.
Sure.
Noel, thank you again. So on that note about addendums, I mean, MAR has been doing a phenomenal job under President Kurt Thompson. So there is a website, www.marcovid19.com, that people can refer to with tons of useful information. There's also information with NAR as well. So I'd like to introduce Jack O'Donoghue, Managing Partner with Touchstone Closing and Escrow. And Jack is also a GBAR affiliate member. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you, Dino, very much for the introduction. And thank you, Noel, for a really thorough presentation, and to everybody at GBAR for the opportunity to present some of this information. I think we're all in a highly unique situation, an unprecedented situation is the word I keep coming back to. Noel had mentioned some of the backstory about facilitating the e-signature option, and she really moved the mountain, and their team moved the mountain to get this thing done in the manner that it was, and we're thankful that we have the opportunity to do that. And it's a great situation for everybody involved, for conveyancers and for the real estate community. But the ultimate question, I really try to think a lot for something like this as if I'm somebody who's watching this right now. And why do I care about this RIN legislation, RIN, the remote wedding signature notarization? Why do I care about this if I'm a realtor? What I think it ultimately comes down to is that your understanding of your client's experience at closing is already really different. And we'll get into that a little bit more, but I have a mask very close to me right here, but we've all got masks now. We've got gloves, all this stuff that I can talk about a bit. But ultimately, as I think about this, and I think my particular expertise over the last several years and the last several months has been to really dig deep on e-signing, e-signature, remote notarization options, and how they have sort of blossomed throughout the country, in different states in the country, in different parts of the country, and why. And obviously this pandemic has had a dramatic impact on that. And I've observed Noel's work and others at REBA and the work of the probate bar to get this current legislation passed. But I've sort of observed, that's where my background is and my focus has been. And to see, look, the technology is available, that's great, right? DocuSign has existed since 2000, right? And the law to facilitate these closings have been around since 2008 or 2012. So it's been around a long time, but we haven't used it. And even in Florida, they launched in January. The law was valid in January for the remote online notarization. Nobody used it until now. So now that we have this legislation, which I think is about a week old, right, Noel? This was signed on Tuesday. Are we going to use it? Is it going to be practical? Are you going to call your conveyancer, your attorney, and say, hey, how do we do this? How do we make this happen? And as you could see from Noel's presentation, it's a bit onerous. There's a lot of steps that are on our end of things that I always like to kind of shield people from, but we have a lot of steps that have to sort of transpire perfectly for these things to go well. And with respect to a purchase closing or a refinance closing, we need a closing package, we need to assemble a closing package, we need to have all this information and the paperwork, and then that physical paper has to actually get to the borrower or to the person for them to sign, and then it has to get back to us, and then for us to notarize, we got to get on record. And it's definitely complicated things, but it is an option. And most importantly, it's a safe option. It's a extremely safe option for people who don't want to, maybe they are at risk, or they have health issues, or they're elderly, or they just don't want to be put at risk. I've dealt with a lot of people recently who have young children or newborns, and they really are taking great care to avoid contact. And so that's what this legislation allows. So do I care? I think ultimately you should care, because the closing experience, when I talk about nationwide, it's virtual. And Noelle and I had a nice conversation offline yesterday for about an hour. I mean, closings will be virtual. That will be a thing. I predict in the next 3 to 5 years, we'll have virtual closings. So how do we, as a realtor, how do you sort of facilitate that walking into the closing room, introduction, hey, this is Jack or Noelle or whomever, and then you're the captain of the ship, you're moving the thing along, and now you don't get to do that because you're not even in the room in this case, or you're in a virtual room. But that's what I envision will happen. So now is a great sort of the lingo accelerated beta test, really, for everybody, for the Boston real estate community to be ready and be prepared for when closings go virtual. How's that going to impact your business? How's that going to impact your day-to-day? That was my initial thought. Why should you care? Why should you care about that 15 minutes or 20 minutes that Noelle went on about? Really important for the real estate community. So switching gears a bit, closing in a post-COVID-19 world. I mentioned before, the flurry of masks. I've gotten so many masks from people, which is amazing, and gloves and safe closing protocols. I've got my notes here. I mean, I could speak off the top of my head, but realistically, at least for us, and these have come down from ALTA, the American Land Title Association, and we've sort of implemented them from early in March, and a lot of people have. I'm sure Noelle's firm has, and really the conveyancing bar overall has implemented these safeguards. Arriving, use hand sanitizer, wash your hands, cover your mouth, cover up. Any guests who are exhibiting any symptoms, you got to notify the staff. There's forms that we can have people fill out, sort of affidavits that they haven't been in contact with anyone with the disease, they haven't been traveling, they haven't left Massachusetts, they have no knowledge essentially that they could possibly be a carrier of coronavirus. Post-closing, wiping the chairs down with Lysol and bleach and any other cleaning products we can find. Typically you go to a closing, there might be all kinds of knickknacks and items on the closing table. Those are all gone. Any reading materials that are traditionally in a lawyer conference room, particularly our conference rooms, those are all gone. Anything reusable, gone. Cleaning personnel, we went from cleaning our office twice a week, we're pretty neat people, to almost every day. We're having cleaning crew come in, and then we're just trying to stay away from each other. So that's the part where we talk about the real estate agent community, and we talk about a closing, which is traditionally and why I do it for a living, frankly, a happy gathering of many people about a major life event. And we don't get to have that experience anymore. Instead of 7 or 8 people, we're having 2 or 3 people. And if, God forbid, 7 or 8 people show up, we're sort of splitting them off into multiple areas, so we don't have 7 or 8 people in a conference room. Also, workforce dispersion. Deb Frank spoke a lot about that initially at the start of this. The Metro Credit Union team, they've sort of scattered and worked remotely and done an exceptional job. We've done the same thing. We've got about 70% of our team that's working remotely, going back to March, and it really just ensures continuity. So I think those are these types of issues and questions. If you're not already asking your mortgage team and your closing team, are you guys doing these things? Those are the questions to ask, because you want to make sure that they're prepared for what's happening realistically. We're really doing everything we can to just minimize the potential spread of this. I would highly recommend the forms. They're from the National Notary Association, the health screening forms. If you haven't seen them before, you can just kind of prepare your borrower for that. And no pun intended, but what I really was thinking about was, how do you provide that white glove customer experience? Everybody knows kind of what that means. Not physically wearing white gloves, although that would be a cool thing to do. If you're not physically present, right? So start thinking about that right now. And maybe because you can't be there physically and you can't sort of field questions that are directed to you at the physical closing, maybe you can schedule a follow-up phone call or a visit after they leave. My idea was to potentially fill the house with groceries or something like that. And I read something in the Wall Street Journal about really groceries are a competitive sport. Here are the account numbers for bills. So this was an idea from Nick Nardone, who's one of our partners in Boston, and he said, get a whole stream of things together. Their account numbers, a packet with all like 50 questions they might have. Save them time closing and post-closing. Really anticipate the questions that they're going to have and answer them, and get ahead of it. And then when I also think about COVID-19, I think about closings in a post-COVID-19 world. I think about the waves of COVID-19. And at first, I recall, earlier in the year, you're reading about how Apple is, obviously with China shut down, that hit Apple hard. Their stock got hit hard. They weren't able to produce iPhones or other products. And so that was the first thing. I was like, oh, whoa, I guess if you're in a business where you have exposure to China, it's bad right now. Then now it affects the United States. It hits NBA, they shut down. And then every state shut down. And now we're here. It's been a while since all those things have happened, but what's the next wave going to look like? What's that experience going to look like for the customer? Is some of these things I think are here to stay, for a long time. I think Noel hit on that with respect to the notary thing. I don't think this is something that's going to go away quickly, even though it's 3 days after the state of emergency. There's a good chance that might last 6 months, 12 months, etc. So with all that in mind, what I think about the conveyancing bar COVID-19 language, I think generally speaking, really the legal services industry, and particularly locally, the Massachusetts conveyancing, group of conveyancers, group of people who do all these closings. Number one, mainly thanks to Costa Nick Ligris, who sort of facilitated a coalition of us, including Noel, early on. We've all kept in touch tremendously well, really, as this was happening through March, April, May, and now as things have happened, we've sort of communicated effectively. But we're really trying to keep pace with the macro economy, with what's happening. And in the economy, we've had 30 million people lose their jobs. We've had massive mortgage market fluctuations. We've had mortgage companies and mortgage servicing companies request bailouts and things like that because they've got people on forbearance. It's like 4% of people are on forbearance right now, so it's crazy. But the big thing I think too, and this is another point from Nick in our office, was really, and myself, case by case. I mean, don't think generally about each of your transactions or each of your clients. I think you really have to there's no one size solution here. You can't treat them all the same. You got to be malleable. You got to be able to craft a solution quickly and help people during this time. The other tip I would say is just to educate yourself. Talk to your broker owners. It's great that you're on calls like this and webinars like this. Talk to other realtors. Even if you directly haven't been involved, you can educate yourself. To Noel's earlier point, get us involved sooner. We're happy to be involved because otherwise we're just going to be cleaning up the mess at purchase and sale. So we're better off to be involved now, get everybody on the same page. The other really important thing is the smoke detectors. Initially, when this was all playing out in March, we weren't sure what was going to happen. Nobody was sure what was going to happen. Are we going to continue? Are transactions going to keep happening? And it occurred to us pretty quickly that without smoke inspection, we can't close. And if we had a team that on one day that called the 350 towns in Massachusetts to find out, what's happening. Are you conducting inspections? Yes, no. And a lot of them were no. So that would have essentially brought the real estate industry to a halt. So, credit to government for stepping in and getting a executive order passed quickly. But now what's happened? I mean, I think ultimately it's about the safety of buyers who are unfamiliar with the properties they're buying, and they're not sure if the homes that they're moving into or condos that they're moving into have appropriate smoke and CO detectors. So that's obviously an incredibly serious issue and something to take really seriously as a real estate professional, as a attorney, any of us involved here. And what we've seen though is a great deal of confusion. A lot of confusion amongst the real estate agents between one another. Backtracking a bit, It's also been something that's changed over time. So if you put a deal together in March versus putting a deal together in April that's closing in July, that's versus closing in September, you know, there's a lot of factors there that play into how that situation is going to be handled, how the executive order is going to be handled. So a lot of confusion, a lot of conflict. And then now just yesterday, fire departments are upset. There was an announcement from MMBA. You know, they're upset. The conveyancing bar is upset. We've got really kind of muddy language. Reba had put forth a form that was used. I know there's been other forms that have been out there. There's just a lot of confusion. You know, is there a holdback? How much should the holdback be, et cetera, et cetera. So with the big thing with lenders, forward your agreement or a copy of the purchase and sale. If you close without a smoke certificate, we're supposed to let the fire department know within 72 hours. That's the procedure. That's not happening, and they're really concerned about it. I guess there's been threats to revoke that order. So that's very concerning for all of us involved. So we want to make sure that we're complying with the intent of the executive order and that we're following the guidelines that are provided to us. Lastly, for my notes are just related to recording delays, which interestingly enough, when I was initially asked to do this last week, were not much of an issue. Fast forward to today, earlier today, Suffolk County just announced they're going to be closed for the week, meaning that they're not physically open. They're working remotely and they're processing electronic filings, but if you have a registered land property in Suffolk County, it's not going on record until at least May 7th. So we've had delays with registered land. That's definitely been the issue, and Suffolk County and Middlesex County. There's something that you guys may have heard about, or many of the realtors may have heard about, gap coverage. And essentially what that means is we can close, you know, the title insurance companies have all got on board with this. We can close and just act like it's on record. It's really common in other states, other parts of the country, where it might not be as simple to facilitate the recording of the documents quickly. But you need to make sure, you know, as the realtor, that your client understands what that means. There's some implications of that. Are they comfortable with that? The money's going to be transferred and gone, but you're not going to be on record. So you're not going to be the notice title owner of the property. So just clients got to understand it. Clients got to be on board with it like anything else. It's not something to be overly alarmed about, but I'm sure we'll get some questions on it. So I hope that was a good kind of synopsis overview. And I'm happy to take any questions that people might have. So thank you.
Thank you so much. So I personally have a question because basically the deputy fire chief for the city of Boston contacted GBAR and told us they are actively doing smoke inspections. So that's something that, you know, other towns are shut down. And, you know, I have one in Watertown personally that I'm going to be doing an addendum and pushing the liability onto the buyer. But I guess it does depend on the town. But if City of Boston comes out with a statement like that, what is your suggestion when it comes to GBAR? I know you're not our legal counsel, but putting it out there and saying to our members that, you know, the City of Boston says that they're good to go.
If you could get a smoke cert, get a smoke cert. Noel?
Yeah, I agree. You know, the idea is that these executive orders, these temporary legislation, they're really intended as a backup if the original procedure isn't safe or isn't available. So if the City of Boston is saying, we'll come in and do a smoke cert and there's no reason not to do that, then get a smoke cert, right? The whole point is that you want a buyer to move into a home and know that their home is safe and protected, and that the carbon monoxide detectors are going to go off if they need to go off, or the smoke alarm will wake them up in the middle of the night. And really the only person that can 100% certify that you have the appropriate smoke detector or CO2, photoelectric and 10-year lithium battery and all of that stuff, that is the fire department. So that is really the first choice and optimal choice. And the second choice is to go through the emergency legislation. But I have to point out that emergency legislation requires a writing between the buyer and seller. It doesn't automatically mean that you can that the buyer is going to have to obtain it. I think it's 90 days following the termination of the state of emergency. So if you are in a situation where you sign the purchase and sale agreement, City of Boston is saying they're doing it, you don't include this language in there, and then the City of Boston says we're not going out anymore, well, now you have to get your attorneys involved to have that agreement that the buyer and seller sign to say, okay, now we're under the emergency order, it goes onto the buyer. So like Jack said, best solution, get the smoke cert. After that, go under the emergency order.
So if a member doesn't feel safe, is that something that the realtor should contact both attorneys and tell them that that person isn't feeling comfortable going into the property? That's another wrench that we've been hearing, from the members.
I mean, I can tell you, I have one client whose husband right now has terminal cancer, and they are being very, very, it's a horrible situation for so many reasons, but they're very concerned about letting anyone into the house while he's in the house. And so this is a situation where they're in a town that they are allowing smoke detector inspections, and we've come to an agreement with the buyers and the sellers to just follow the emergency order. So like Jack said, it's a case-by-case basis. You can't look into generalities. You have to look at each case and get your attorneys involved, get your team together, have these discussions with your team early on.
I'm just going through some of the questions. What's an average amount for a holdback do you suggest?
I would say, personally, I would say $1,000, but I think it's also case by case. I think in some situations, there's people who can go through these properties and sort of prove that they've updated everything and everything's fine. Maybe you take a little less. I think we all have to be flexible. I would default to 1,000. That's my. I think it's. I need to be on both sides of this, right? So for me, I know we all do, right? But for me, I think $1,000 is fair.
And there are some situations where we don't even have a holdback. So, $1,000 should be able to cover. If you have a large house and you have to think that each of those lithium photoelectronic battery, when I went to Home Depot the other day, I took a look at one. I think the one I saw cost $50 or $60. So if you have a large house and you count the amount of ones that you have to put, install, and then maybe it's hardwired, $1,000 really covers it. If you have a small studio apartment with 2 smoke detectors, maybe 1,000 doesn't. So 1,000 is a good sort of starting point. And then, as always, look at every situation individually.
Okay, thank you. I'm trying to read this question. It says, I have a closing in Suffolk on Thursday or Friday, which will be e-recorded. Are you saying it will not be recorded until May 7th?
No, that'll be fine. E-recording is open and active.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I guess that's it for the questions. I did forget to mention that, Jack, you are a partner sponsor with GBAR for 2020, and we do appreciate that. Thank you so much. Okay.
Dino, we had hoped when we did that we'd be doing some fun events. I mean, this is great, but we'll get back to those.
We will get back together. All right, so thank you guys. I'm going to introduce John Duchelski now, the Executive Vice President for the Greater Boston Realty Board. He has a couple of updates. Unless Jack or Noel, do you have anything else to add, or I'm just going to transition over to John?
I mean, the one thing I would add is I know that there's a lot of questions that are going to come up, and I would say, reach out to your attorney, or I'm sure Jack or I would be glad to take an email or a phone call from you. So don't hesitate to reach out to us if you want to learn more information. I hope I didn't speak out of.
All right, thank you guys.
Thank
John.
you.
Yeah, no, and that's perfect segue, Noel, because we actually do share email addresses when we send out the recording of the webinar to all attendees. So we were hoping you would say that. So thank you. What I just had an update on is a couple of things that we want to share with members, a new member benefit that's coming up, and then to remind you about some of the resources that are available. So first and foremost, you may, if you've seen the monthly minute video that came out yesterday with President Jason Gell, you know that we have a partnership that we've just executed with iSpy 360, which is a virtual showing and tour company for their platform at a substantially reduced rate of $20 per month per agent for subscriptions. And if you sign on for a full year, they're going to be offering an even an additional discount to that. So we're excited about that. Watch for official news through some email communications from us within a matter of a week or two here. But we're excited to make that member benefit available. And they also have partnerships with a number of equipment suppliers for cameras and other things that we hope to include and make available to our members. So again, watch for all of that information in your inbox very soon. Just want to remind members as well about, Dino, you mentioned the MAR website earlier, marcovid19.com, for great resources, but we also have one on our website, a microsite for coronavirus concerns. So be sure to check that out. We do, just as a reminder, have documentation up there that has all the local ordinances and policies that have been put in place across the 64 communities in our jurisdiction. And so that includes things like any restrictions that have been put in place for open houses or showings, residential construction activity, evictions or foreclosures, which now pretty much go by the new state law that's been put in place, and also sort of piggybacking on the document that Jack and his team have developed. We've tried to capture as best we can any announcements made by local communities with regard to the performance of smoke and CO detector inspections. In addition to that, we've posted new member advisories just this week with regard to the remote notarization law and the eviction and foreclosure laws that went in place over the past week or so. So you can look for that. And an FAQ as well, an FAQ guide and guidance on the pandemic unemployment insurance benefits that are available. So look for all of that on the website and more. And then these webinars, again, will continue for the remainder of this month on Tuesdays at 2:30. So just watch for the announcement on next week's session. Still working on a speaker and a topic for that. But we are pleased to confirm that we have secured NAR Chief Economist Lawrence Yoon to be the featured speaker at our session of GBAR Live on May the 19th. So Dina, with that, I'll toss it back to you.
All right, thank you, John. Once again, I just wanted to thank our webinar sponsor, Metro Credit Union, and Deb Frank, and attorneys Noel DiCarlo and Jack O'Donohue. Thank you so much for today. Really appreciate it. And I hope everyone here can sign on at 4:15. GBAR Global is having we're whisking you away to Mexico, Playa del Carmen. And just on Facebook, just go to GBAR Global. And I think that's it. Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Thank you. Take care.